out front tonight, Nancy Pelosi accusing President Trump of bribery, saying Trump's actions are worse and bigger than what forced Nixon from office.
What President Trump has done on the record in terms of acting to advantage a foreign power to help him in his own election, and of the obstruction of information about that, the cover-up, makes what Nixon did look almost small. The devastating testimony corroborated evidence of bribery uncovered in the inquiry, and that the president abused power and violated his oath by threatening to withhold military aid and a White House meeting in exchange for an investigation into his political rival.
Using the word bribery instead of quid pro quo is significant. I mean, those words may mean the same thing to most people, but the reality of it is that the word bribery is in the Constitution. Quote, the president shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. It's right there, making it clear to the American public that bribery is an impeachable offense. And Trump himself knows it. He has been tweeting and retweeting through the day, insisting he never tried to bribe Ukraine's president, using that word as well. It comes at the same time as Trump's aides are trying to get ahead of tomorrow's public testimony from the president's former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. She testified behind closed doors that she was targeted by Trump because she was trying to fight real corruption in Ukraine. Her testimony backed up publicly from the Democrats' first impeachment witnesses.
Of 2018 and 2019, I became increasingly aware of an effort by Rudy Giuliani and others, including his associates Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, to run a campaign to smear Ambassador Yovanovitch.
The former ambassador, Masha Yovanovitch, has been treated poorly, caught in a web of political machinations both in Kyiv and in Washington.
Tonight, the White House responding, an official suggesting, well, the attacks on Yovanovitch aren't impeachable, adding, quote, ambassadors serve at the pleasure of the president. Well, Yovanovitch, not the only one who will be testifying tomorrow. There's going to be another crucial testimony. The diplomat who is said to have overheard President Trump asking Gordon Sondland about the status of the investigations in Ukraine is also going to be meeting with investigators tomorrow. Caitlin Collins is out front live outside the White House. So, Caitlin, how is the president reacting today to all of this?
Well, Aaron, yesterday the president said he hadn't watched a minute of the first public hearing, but today he said only normal people who had watched it would shut the impeachment inquiry down after seeing George Kent and Bill Taylor testify. And that comes as not only the White House, but Republicans are leaning on this defense of saying that there was nothing new learned yesterday, which just simply isn't true, as you just noted by what Bill Taylor said, drawing the president closer to this pressure campaign than we've seen from any of these other closed-door testimonies so far. The other thing they're relying on is saying that this is only second or third hand information, but there are questions inside the White House about just how long a defense like that can last, given the fact that Gordon Sondland is going to testify next week, and he's someone who has spoken with the president directly. Now, putting that aside, the president has been talking about impeachment a lot today at the White House, our sources tell us, including at a lunch with Republican senators today. And then, Aaron, just before Trump left the White House tonight to go to this rally, he had a very interesting meeting that reporters noticed where you could see him in the Oval Office with the Attorney General Bill Barr and the White House counsel Pat Cipollone, having what some described as an animated discussion. You can see Bill Barr there through the Oval Office windows, something that essentially left reporters outside waiting on the president for over half an hour. But then he came out and exited the White House, and instead, Aaron, of talking to reporters, he went straight to Marine One and didn't say a word about what that meeting was about.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. And out front now, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is on both the Oversight and Judiciary committees, so obviously front and center in all of the testimony. So, Congressman, Speaker Pelosi is now using the word bribery specifically. Chairman Schiff also indicating bribery could be an impeachment charge against the president. Is this essentially a rebranding of quid pro quo? Bribery is now the new word that will be used because it is the word in the Constitution.
Well, bribery and extortion are intricately interwoven in what the president did in the Ukraine shakedown. Essentially, he took this $391 million that we had voted in military and security assistance for a besieged foreign ally resisting Russian aggression and occupation and said, I'll give you this if you comply with all of my demands and all of my conditions. That's bribery. Or alternatively, you can view it as a shakedown, as exercising coercive leverage to extort these conditions from the Ukrainian government. In either event, the president has betrayed his oath of office, he's betrayed our foreign policy, and he's betrayed our election because he tried to lure a foreign government into the election in order to essentially smear one of his rivals.
So you're going to be in the room tomorrow for the Holmes deposition. Now, according to Ambassador Taylor, Holmes overheard this phone call between President Trump and Ambassador Sondland, which took place in a restaurant. And Trump, according to what Taylor says Holmes will say, asked for an update on the investigations in Ukraine. And then after the call, Sondland said to the aide that Trump cared more about the Bidens and the investigations than Ukraine. Why are we only finding out about this call now? Does that bother you?
Well, no, this is how trials work, and this is how evidence comes into being. Certain people testify, and then other people hear things that remind them of things that they saw and they knew, and I'm not quite sure what the situation was here. But look, all of the evidence points to just one story, which is the president deployed Giuliani and his team of Parnas and Fruman to go over to Ukraine to clear the U.S. ambassador out of the way, and we'll hear about that tomorrow with Ambassador Yovanovitch's testimony, to get her out of the way in order better to apply direct pressure onto the Ukrainian government to do the political bidding of the president. And all of that was about his personal reelection. It had nothing to do with the strategic foreign policy objectives of America, much less the defense of democracy and human rights in Ukraine.
I want to ask you about Ambassador Yovanovitch in a moment, but first on Holmes, when you say you're not quite sure what happened there, what kind of questions do you have? What do you want to know from Holmes tomorrow?
Well, I would like to know exactly what he heard and how he knew it was the president who was on the phone. And I would like to know exactly what he heard the president say, what were the words. And, you know, this is just one more piece of evidence that fits into an entire sequence of events. There's no rival hypothesis out there about what happened. You know, all of the bricks are adding up to one big wall, which says the president tried to exercise coercive control over Ukraine or to bribe Ukraine in order to do his political bidding.
So you're talking about all these bricks adding up to one big wall, and yet multiple sources are telling us that in a private meeting this week, Speaker Pelosi and her top lieutenants were skeptical that there would be any dramatic shift in public opinion, even as these public hearings are getting underway. Do you share that skepticism or not, Congressman?
Well, but I'm by nature a very optimistic person, and I think that the vast majority of Americans want their government to be involved in good public policy and to act with honesty and integrity. And I think when the story gets out, most Americans will be really shocked and very upset about what they're seeing. On the other hand, there have been big changes, not so much in the basic character and honesty of the American people, but in people's access to information. There are people whose only access to the news is through certain channels like Fox News that are not reporting the facts in a disinterested and objective way. And that's a real danger for the republic.
So tomorrow will be the second public impeachment hearing. Obviously, you referenced Ambassador Yovanovitch. She's going to testify about an alleged smear campaign against her, which led to Trump getting rid of her. The thing is, Trump owns that, right? He says, absolutely, that's what I did. And the White House tonight is telling CNN, quote, is that an impeachable offense? Ambassadors serve at the pleasure of the president. Does the president need to give any reason really at all to get rid of an ambassador, or is he on more solid footing on this?
Well, I think that just confuses the issue. They're answering the wrong question. No one is saying impeach the president because he removed an ambassador. The question is whether the removal of the ambassador was for reasons of clearing all obstacles to their political and financial schemes in Ukraine. And that's what took place with Ambassador Yovanovitch. Rudy Giuliani and his team wanted to get rid of her so they could exercise the leverage over President Zelensky that they wanted. She was a real corruption fighter. They were on the side of all the corruption. They were trying to exploit the corruption and direct the corruption at Zelensky so the president could get the favors that he wanted. She got in the way because she was forwarding the real American policy, which was to oppose corruption in Ukraine and to try to nurture and strengthen democratic institutions there. All over Europe, all over the world, there's a struggle between the tyrants and the despots, Putin's team and Orban's team. They're all on the side of corruption, and she was opposing them, and they wanted to get her out of the way so the president could essentially work his will on Ukraine.